Hello, Peggy here. Welcome. Welcome to today's Facebook Live. The topic is why it is important to know the difference or the distinction between human consciousness and non-dual consciousness. Welcome. And I'm going to realign my video so I can see the comments. So if you're here, please say hi. I love knowing you're here, and please post any comments or questions while we're together. And if you're watching this on replay, please post hashtag replay. And the same, if you have questions or comments, please post those and I will respond. Hi, Sharon. I am so glad you are here. As you know, of course, this is the Facebook group Answering the Call, and so the topics that we're always working with in this group have to do with answering the call. So what is that call? The call is really twofold. One is the call that probably most of us have, which is some sort of longing, some sense that that something's missing. And eventually, when we come home to ourselves, then of course, then we've answered that call. And so that call is that longing, it's consciousness, it's our essential nature inviting us to know our essential nature, inviting us to know consciousness, inviting us to know awareness. God's infinite being is the religious name for that. So we feel this calling or longing, and that's our invitation to come home to ourselves. And then as we feel permeated with our essential nature, there's another longing that I believe occurs, or a sense of something like there's something here, there's a unique expression for me to bring to the world. So those go hand in hand, that we do know we're unique. We know that there's something unique for me to do here, be here, express here. And so we're doing both of those at the same time. And of course, so today's all topics, of course, are very relevant to that, right? But today's topic makes some distinctions that can help us understand maybe why it's been kind of confusing sometimes to answer the call, or to know what our life's work calling, so to speak, is, our life's being calling is, which is distinct from the calling that is the invitation to know our essential nature, to know and be able to answer the question, who am I? So as we begin this conversation today, again, why it is important to know the distinction between human consciousness and non-dual consciousness, let's allow ourselves to arrive together. So often when we come to a meeting like this or a Facebook Live, that we were just coming in from somewhere else, maybe just hurrying to get to this space. So we want to allow ourselves a few seconds to bring our thoughts here, our emotions here, our body here, so we can be fully present with each other as we spend this time together. And I'm grateful that we get to spend this time together. And I also am acknowledging what's occurring in the world. And if we examine that, you hear me talk a lot, of course, about the non-dual nature that we are, the one being that we are. And with what's happening in the world today, so depending on when you're watching this, today is the day that within 24 hours or so that Russia has invaded Ukraine. So a lot of us are experiencing something with that. And if we examine that in the way that I'm offering right now, we realize, oh yeah, I experienced something relative to those people. So maybe they're not those people. Maybe they're me. I experience a deep connection with what's happening. I'm not separate from what's happening over there. And in fact, of course, wisdom teachings, non-dual teachings that have been around for thousands of years tell us that over and over and over again, that there's no separation between us and anybody, anything. And so we sense that maybe at a deeper level when we have these crises occurring. Also, even science tells us something like this, which is we each have hundreds of billions of atoms in our bodies right now that were once in everybody else's bodies. So all those people in Russia, all those people in Ukraine, all those people on that are the soldiers right now, some atoms from them are in our bodies. Some atoms from us are in their bodies. We exchange atoms all the time, pockets of information all the time. And in fact, so every time we breathe in, we're breathing atoms of air that were once inside another human being, including those in Ukraine and Russia. So as we explore today, what we're going to talk about, distinction between human consciousness and non-dual consciousness, I wanted to presence the reality that we're experiencing right now, that it's maybe more energized, that, oh yeah, we're not separate. We're impacted in the physical reality with all the repercussions that are going to take place, plus emotionally. But then when we realize the truth of it, we also realize, oh, I'm experiencing a deep connection there. I am connected. There is no separation. So, as we let that really sink in, I have atoms of those people in me, and they have atoms of me in them. The oneness that we are. Now let's look deeper at the distinction between human consciousness and non-dual consciousness. So everything I've been talking about right now is non-dual consciousness related, which means that the non-dual understanding is that we're all one being, that everything, every person, animal, insect, rock, that everything arises from this one being consciousness, like an ocean, the waves in the ocean. All those waves arise out of the ocean. The same with us. There's one field of consciousness, or that is consciousness rather. There's one field that is consciousness, and everything arises out of consciousness. It's all movements of consciousness, our minds, our activities of consciousness. That consciousness, our essential nature, never changes, never evolves, doesn't need improving, doesn't need developing, can't be harmed by anything, can't be discolored by anything. It never changes. It already is everything that's already existed, that ever will exist. It's everything right now. And it's perfection. It's love, peace, happiness, fulfillment. When we connect with that, and let's try that right now. It's really actually very simple, even though we because of the ways we've been conditioned to think about it, that it's supposed to be really hard to be enlightened. It's actually not that hard, and I talk about it occasionally. And in this particular moment, it might be a little challenging. So after we're off, keep trying, and you'll know what I'm talking about. So the first thing we can do is actually ask ourselves, am I aware of what's happening right now? Am I aware that I hear Peggy talking? Am I aware that I'm looking at a computer screen? And am I aware? You're probably saying yes. And that yes arises out of that knowing. And then ask yourself if you're aware that you're aware. That sometimes is a little more challenging to people, so sit with that, but think about it. If you could tell me that you're aware of what's happening, you had to be aware that you were aware in order to say that you were aware of what's happening. Okay, go sit with that. But once we connect with that and stay with it for even just a few seconds, we start realizing and experiencing the vastness of that, the infinite nature of that. and it feels some sort of peace, open space. So play with it. But that's consciousness, awareness, source, spirit. Never changes. All right. So then there's human consciousness. And what is challenging is that we use the same word for two different things. The same word for two different things. Just like there's a bat that flies around and hangs upside down, a mammal. And then there's bat like a baseball bat. Same word, totally two different things. Same thing with consciousness. Now they're kind of closely related, which helps make it more confusing, but they're actually two different things. It just, in our English language, we just use the same word for two different things. Of course, with consciousness, that's also awareness. We use also the words of awareness, infinite being, divine wisdom, divine intelligence. Those are all the same names. But we often use consciousness for that. The awareness that nothing ever changes in that. That's who we are, essentially are. And then there's human consciousness, which does develop. So if you want to study this more, there's a book by Robert Keegan called In Over Our Heads that helps explain, because a lot of people right now do kind of feel in over their heads, like, why aren't things happening like they are in the world? Or I can't quite handle what's happening at the workplace right now. I can't quite handle what's happening in life right now. The odds are high it's because they have reached a level of consciousness. So consciousness evolves. There are levels of consciousness that they've reached a level of consciousness that they don't have the capacity to handle, to work with, to be with those particular situations. So, for example, if a teenager, a lot of people expect a lot of teenagers. Like, if they're late after curfew, or late, they miss their curfew, they're late, and the parents are all upset and worried, and then the child comes home and can't understand, why are you so worried? It's because, and so of course the parents are furious at that. What do you mean, why aren't I worried? Well, there are two different levels of consciousness. The son is not, or daughter, whoever, is not developed a level to be able to take a different perspective. A lot of younger people can only see the world from their point of view. So they can't understand, why are their parents so upset? Because they were fine. They knew they were fine. It's because they can't yet take another perspective. It takes a while to evolve human consciousness where we can take multiple perspectives. So the more that we advance our human consciousness, develop a level of higher levels of consciousness, then we are able to take more and more perspectives, understand more and more about the world, see it in different ways, access it in different ways. So that's why it's so important to develop it, and that's one of the things I think is sorely missing in the world, because very few people have access to this information, number one, much less being able to work with it. And so, to me it should be mainstream, and I'm still thinking about how to make it mainstream. I mean, it's in all my programs, or if I work with individual clients, or it's in the praxis, the wild ones out in the field, if you're interested in working with it at the level of where you're actually doing the work. But as far as just general mainstream, like at a public school level, it's not offered anywhere. And so if you want to explore that more too, so In Over Our Heads is a great place to start. Spiral Dynamics by Don Beck and I can't remember his other name, the other author right now. But those are two places to start with that. And then human consciousness development, besides, that's called vertical development, developing higher levels of capacity, more in perspectives toward life. Also, that's where we're asking deeper questions like, what matters to me? How do I want to live? Those are all vertical development questions. And then there's horizontal development in human consciousness, which is more like, how do I get effective at reaching goals? How to become more effective, more efficient? What are my goals? And so that's a horizontal development but it's still developing our consciousness because we're becoming more effective, efficient, more evolved as a human being. So that's evolving our consciousness, both vertical development, horizontal development, so the more we develop all of that, then of course we're going to be more effective in the world, more, in fact, more fulfilled, and more is available to us, more possibilities, because we have a better understanding of ourselves, of other people, of what's happening in the world, how things come together, and more possibilities, because we've expanded our capacity, we've expanded our understanding. So, back to just two main differences. Consciousness, the non-dual consciousness, the non-dual understanding of our essential nature. Hey, Sue, so glad you're here. Our consciousness, our essential nature never changes, doesn't evolve. But our human consciousness does, and we want to attend to it. We want to help it evolve. In fact, I think that's a lot of the reason we have the problems in the world. Well, there are two reasons for the problems in the world. The main one is we don't know who we are. If we knew we were one being, things would be really different, in my humble opinion. But number two, we also aren't attending to our human development. People don't, so a lot of people are confused in life, like, why can't I succeed? Why can't I go further? Why do they think that and they think that? But if we had access, I mean, people have access to it. They don't know they have access to it, so effectively they don't have access to it. But if we had access and took on both of these understandings, then we would understand each other in different ways in our human experience, but a different understanding of the world and what's possible, and accessing our fundamental nature of love and peace and happiness and fulfillment as we develop our human consciousness. All right, so let's see what else I want to say here. So the impact, I kind of said this, but I'll say it more directly. The impact of our not developing our human consciousness is some of what I already said. You know, a lot of the problems in the world because we don't understand each other. Like people say, you know, can't understand why Republicans think this way and Democrats think another. Well, if we understood the development of human consciousness, we'd understand. So immediately we'd start having more empathy, more ability to listen, to be curious, because we would know that we're just at different levels, and no level's good or right or wrong or better. It's just like a high school kid is going to be a certain level of consciousness. 5 or 10 years later, another level. It's not good. It's just what naturally human beings do and progress. And so those of us that have access to this, we're very lucky and privileged. You know, then we can keep evolving, and so then we have more understanding and appreciation of the world and ourselves, and how to live the most meaningfully and with other people. And then we can develop lines too, so we can come better at relationships, better at emotional development, moral development, spiritual development. Let's see, what are some of the other lines? Interpersonal relationships. So those are all capacities and abilities that we develop if we realize, oh, they're actually, people have categorized these lines and levels. Oh, and I mentioned spiral dynamics. So that's just the one I'm most familiar with, but there are several people with several different models. They do overlap quite a bit. And in fact, Ken Wilber created this integral theory with that in mind. There are all these theories on the planet: Eastern religion, Western religion, Eastern approaches, Western approaches, psychology, therapy, all these different approaches. There must be commonality in all of them, and that's how he came up with the integral theory. And so there's a lot of overlap, and he was able to articulate and put together a map, what he calls a map, of an integral map of all these that are kind of placeholders for all these different models and theories where they overlap. I hope I didn't confuse you there. Anyway, so there are lines of development, there are levels of development, and then there's horizontal development. And we want to be working with all of that to be the most fully human. Why else are we here? But to be as alive as we can be, the most fully human beings we can be, both as knowing who we truly are, so being more loving, more fulfilled, happier, and expressing that in our unique way. At the same time, getting better, yes, at relationships and relating and emotional capacities and so on. Oh, and then the other thing so let's see, I said I would talk about the difference between human consciousness and non-dual consciousness, why it's important to know. I think I've covered that. Now, the impact of not developing, how I did that. Now, my personal theory about it is this, totally personal. But my theory is this, and it was based on me trying to put together some understanding of spiral dynamics as I was bringing it to the wild ones out in the field. And I was thinking, spiral dynamics, that somehow there's something missing when we start talking about consciousness as our essential nature. And as I did the research and researched some about Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, I finally figured out what was off for me. So spiral dynamics, I believe, is based on well, and it has to be because of who created these theories. And I don't mean anything wrong, but it's all coming out of an understanding of separation. All those theories, spiral dynamics and the other ones that are similar, all come out of a basic understanding and belief in separation. So so they're all developed on that, which is kind of shaky ground. But I believe as long as human beings believe we're separate and living as separate, then we need to understand those models. Even as those of us that are integrating the knowing that we're one being. Why? Because it's still a big part of how we're living in the world, that we're separate, and so we have to unlearn a lot of what we learned, and so to unlearn it, we've got to understand it. Okay, but what I think is that we naturally would have developed. We wouldn't have to think about it in the way that I just spoke about it, if we had lived as one being from the beginning. So Maslow in the 1930s spent some time with the Blackfoot tribe, and they were all really happy. He couldn't quite understand, why are they happy? And as he studied it more, it was because they started out with the idea that a person, as soon as they're born, is already a divine being. And the community as a whole, their role is to help that person uniquely express their unique expression. So just from the get-go, there was a knowing of one being, a knowing of oneness. We're all in this together. We're all one being, and this is a divine being right now, and we're going to nurture that divinity. So that's why I think that if we had had a culture that was like that, then we wouldn't need spiral dynamics, wouldn't need to know that, and wouldn't need that explanation. Peggy's theory. But that's a nice theory. But right now, we still want to work with all the principles I said around spiral dynamics and all that, because we didn't grow up in that culture. Nothing wrong with that culture. And I also want to make it very clear that when I make these distinctions, nothing is wrong. Consciousness has already allowed everything, which means we've allowed everything. So there's nothing wrong. But the more awareness we can bring to who we are and what's happening in the world, then of course we have better understanding, better ability to participate in life, better ability to be more fully who we truly are. So I'm making those distinctions for that purpose. Okay, let's see. Sharon, as consciousness, I have infinite potential, and through my consciousness, I develop that. I think so. Let me repeat back. I think this is what you're saying. So yes, as consciousness, awareness, source, you don't even have infinite potential. You are infinite potential. You are it. And then through human consciousness, you are able to develop that potential and develop it more and more fully express the infinite potential you are already. So I think that's probably what you mean. If you have a question about it based on what you said and what I said, but yeah, right there, exactly. We already are infinite potential, and then yes, in our human experience, we develop that, And we usually call it developing our potential, developing human potential, developing human consciousness. And they're two different things, because that's the other part that gets people it's been very confusing, because people think that if I'm developing my human consciousness, I'm developing consciousness. No, no, no. We're not developing consciousness. We're not helping consciousness evolve. We're not helping consciousness know itself. We're not helping consciousness develop. Already knows everything, already is everything. It doesn't need our help, number one. And number two, it can't develop because it already is everything. So I hope this is making sense. But that's what gets a lot of people really confused. And I had to study that for a while. I could not get that figured out. I'm like, how is it that human consciousness develops, this other consciousness doesn't develop? But I hadn't made those distinctions for a while. And people that were talking about it weren't making that distinction. But I finally figured it out. I go, oh, that's what's happening. That's why it's so confusing. And that's why even for a lot of people that are in the field that we're in and working in the field, they get it confused because they haven't illuminated for themselves that distinction. In fact, I sent a newsletter out yesterday about this, and somebody wrote back, brilliant. I don't know why I had never thought of that. So it starts making so much sense about the confusion, and then why, if we're developing our human consciousness, it's just different. It's just different. It's because as we develop our human consciousness, to some extent, we think, well, I'll feel more like one, or I'll get to being one someday, and that's a progressive path. I think some people over the years have sat on a meditation cushion for 50 years and then they're enlightened. That's fine. We're in the direct path. We're doing the direct path where you go to knowing your consciousness, as we did a while ago, being aware and being aware of being aware, and then living that as the foundation, and then expressing that love, fulfillment, and developing ourselves in our human capacity to fully express consciousness by developing our human consciousness. But we can't get there from here. We can't, in my opinion, a few people may be sitting on a meditation cushion for 50 years. But if we think we have to develop to get there, what's already happening? We're thinking we're separate. We're not realizing. We're not knowing we're one. We start with an idea of separation. It's pretty hard to get from here to there. Maybe a few people do. But I think that's been one of the biggest challenges over the years to all of it, to living as what we could really be living as. Sharon, yeah, that's what she was trying to say. All right, that's what I thought. All right, let's see. Let me see if I cover it. And then, the next steps to take. Well, the next steps would be, of course, you can join the praxis. We'd love for you to join us. This is where we do all of this work day in, day out. But I already mentioned, I'd read Being Aware by Rupert Spira. I would read In Over Our Heads. It's a bit challenging to read, I'll warn you, but it's a great book. And then you can move into Spiral Dynamics. Or you can email me or post a question in here if you have a specific area you're going, I kind of want to develop this area of my human consciousness. What's a good resource for that? Happy to do that. Or you can even DM me and say that's what you want to do. You just want to have a conversation that supports you in your own development. That's fine. I'm happy to anytime have a totally free, no strings conversation about your own human development and developing your human consciousness. So please DM me or put it in the comment, and I'll be in touch. Because as you can tell, my commitment is that we know who we are, we live as who we are, and that everybody get to fully express what they're here to express. So, I think that'd be the next steps. If you have any questions about next steps, and then to go sit in that place as long as you can, as often as you can, that being aware space. Just go there, let it permeate you, let it fill you up. That's the ocean that you are. Experience the ocean that you are over and over and over again, so that it becomes the true knowing that that's who you are and what you are. Okay, I think I have covered everything. And so we can remember that who we truly are is consciousness, awareness, source, spirit. One same name for one thing, which is actually not a thing, but we have to try to speak about it some way in order um, to explore this and to know it. So consciousness, who we truly are, never evolves, never changes, already is everything. And then when we go to that space, it is an open, empty, allowing space of awareness. When we go there, we experience, and it's hard to put words to it. So if you don't have words for it, that probably means you're right there. Because there aren't any words that quite match it. It's just a sense of calm, a sense of vastness. That's it. That's who you truly are, right there. And so the longer we stay there, the more real it becomes for us in our knowing, in our experience. So all of this work is experiential. All of it's experiential. And then we develop our human consciousness so that we are as effective as we can be in relationships, getting things done, achieving what our heart's desires are, and then developing our level of human consciousness so we can see more and more perspectives of the world, understand more and more about people and who people are, and all that's how people see the world. And then it helps us open our hearts even more, helps us set aside old patterns and old beliefs. Besides that, knowing that we're consciousness helps, but also this kind of accelerates it a bit, because then we have a new understanding of life and expands our possibilities, expands our understanding, opens our hearts more. All right, so I think that is it. Are there any questions or comments? Anything else anybody wants to say? Let me make sure that I haven't missed any comments. Nope. Anything? Questions? Comments? All right. So thank you for being here today as I guess I will say this, because I did post this, something in Facebook that I also emailed to the members of the Praxis, which is with this situation that's happening in the world, I don't know about you, but of course a lot of people, we talk about what can I do? And really, the thing to do is first, remember that it's already been allowed. Consciousness allowed it. We allowed it. Not like allowed, like let somebody fall off the cliff. I don't mean that kind of allowing. Just knowing that we don't know why things happen. We don't know the meaning of it. We don't know the purpose of it. Allow it. Why would we just allow it to begin with? And I don't mean just allow it. I mean allow it. Because if we don't, then if we think it's wrong or we're judging it, we're actually resisting it and we're energizing it. So even just from a practical perspective, we don't want to judge it. So it's recognizing and allowing it to sink in, experiential. Wow, okay, it's already allowed. And we can the most important thing we can do, besides whatever we feel called to do, if we want to donate to something, or some people probably flying over there now to try to help them out. If I feel called to do that, great. But if we're not actually called to go over there, or we donate, but then we still, what can we do? We start with ourselves. Where am I at war with myself? As long as I'm at war with myself, there will be war in the world. Because the world is a reflection of me. So the more I can experience the peace that we already are, and bring that out in all conversations, all activities, even if I'm just sitting reading a book or walking in the woods, to experience the peace that I am, because what did I say a while ago about atoms? Everything, we're exchanging information with the field all the time. So let's exchange peace with the world. We send peace out. Be the peace that we wish. That's what we can do. That makes the biggest difference. Be peaceful as much as we can, as often as we can, because it's actually our essential nature. But yes, because of habits, it doesn't seem like it's readily available a lot of the times. So we just keep at it, being more and more peaceful, expressing that more and more in all of our relationships, conversations, even emails, posts, so on. We share the peace that we are. Okay. All right. Thank you again for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.